Alright guys, so your homework for tonight is to go to page 71 of your student journal. We're going to do exploration 1, and all of these problems come out of the big idea math book. I'm just showing you how to work them out. Alright, so it says I'm going to show you, it says use a dynamic geometry software to draw two parallel lines. Draw a third line that intersects both parallel lines. Find the measures of the 8 angles that are formed. What can you conclude? Alright, so I'm going to show you, and I'm going to use my favorite software when it comes to dynamic geometry software, and that is Geogebra. Alright, so it said to draw two parallel lines. So you can go to Geogebra, and I'm going to draw a line, and this is my line AB. Then I'm going to go put a point. Then I'm going to go and create my parallel lines. There we go. And then I'm going to go and draw a transversal, and I'm going to call this transversal line DE. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and go in here and put these points so that I can do my angles. Now I'm going to do my angle measurement. Alright, got that one. Got that one. And all I'm doing is clicking 3 points so it'll give me the angle measurements, and I'll move them all over for you in a second. Need another point. Alright, let's get my another angle. Okay. Almost there. Alright, so now let me move this stuff around so we can see what these numbers actually are. 128, 151. Okay. Alright, so I have my parallel lines, and I have line DE, which is called a transversal. So I have my parallel lines and lines DE, which is called a transversal. Hold on, give me a second. Let me get this up and going. Alright, there we go. So I did what it asked me to do. So I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to call this measure 1, angle 1. I'm going to call this angle, angle 2. This one, angle 3. This one angle 4, this one angle 5, this one 6, this one 7, and this one 8. Alright, so we're going to go through and look at some things that we noticed here. Alright, so if you look at angle 1, it is the same exact measurement as angle 5. And these, so I'm gonna go here and say the measure of angle 1 is congruent to the measure of angle 5. 1 and 5 are the same. If I go to angle 3 and look at this one down here, I can say the measure of angle, the measure of angle 3 is congruent to the M means measure of angle down here, 8. There are also some special names for these angles. Alright, so if you look at the measure of angle 1, it is on the top of the parallel line it is on the top of the line AB. So angle 1 is at the top of the line of line AB. Now if we go and look down here, angle 5 is on the top of line HC. So these two angles are on the same spot in their lines. They're sitting on top of the lines. So measure of angle 1 and 5 are called corresponding angles. They're called corresponding angles. And I like to write it for short, CA. Okay, we have the same relationship for angle 3 and angle 8. If you look at angle 3 down here, it is at the bottom of the top line. It's at the bottom of the top line. And if you look at the bottom line, angle 8 is also at the bottom of the top line. So it is also called a corresponding angle. And I'm just going to write CA for short. Okay, there are some more things we need to talk about. If you look at angles 3 and angles 5, if you add these two angles together, they are equal to 180 degrees. So we're going to say the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 5 equals 180. And what's the rule for that? They're called supplementary angles. And supplementary angles are angles that add together or sum to equal 180. They're supplementary angles and they're on the same side of this line down the middle, which is called the transversal. So I'm going to highlight this transversal. They are on the same side of the transversal. Okay, same side of the transversal. All right, so that's the measure of angle 3 and the measure of angle 5. You have the exact same relationship with the measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 8. They too are supplementary. All right, so if you did the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 8, it is also equal to 180. And we're going to say for that one, we're going to call that same side of transversal, ST. And then for the reasoning, yes, they're same side of the transversal. All right, so now let's go in the middle of the parallel lines. So I'm going to highlight line AB, and here is line HC. I'm going to highlight these two lines so you can see what I'm talking about. In between these two lines are some angles. We have angles 4, 3, 6, and 5. So if we look at 4 and 3, if we add these two angles together, they are supplementary. So I want to say the measure of angle 4, oops, hold on, I'm getting things backwards. The measure, oops, the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 3. So the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 3 is equal to 180 degrees. And because they're right beside each other, that is called a linear pair. And we're going to call that for short LP, linear pair. Okay, we have the same relationship between 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and 1 and 2. 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2. They're called linear pairs, all of those, because they're right beside each other. Yeah, they're right beside each other, and they equal 180 degrees. They're also supplementary. Okay, so if we go back in the middle of the yellow and the green line, I want you to look at angles 4 and 5. These angles right here, they are on opposite sides of the transversal. So we're going to say alternate, and they're in the middle of the parallel lines. So alternate interior angles. So I'm going to say the measure of angle 4 plus, is congruent to the measure of angle 5. And they're called alternate interior angles. And I'm going to show you why we call them alternate. We're going to call these AI. They're alternate interior angles because for one, 4 and 5 are in the middle of the parallel lines. So alternate interior angles. And they're called alternate interior angles. And for one, 4 and 5 are in the middle, interior, middle of the, 4 and 5 are in the middle, interior, middle of the parallel lines, and they're on all opposite sides, so they're alternate interior angles. And that same rule works for the measure of angle 3 is congruent to the measure of angle 6, and they're also by the rule of AI. Okay, now let's go to the outside of the parallel lines. If you see 2, it's the same thing as 8, and they are on alternate sides of the transversal, the red line going down the middle. So 2 and 8 are also congruent. So the measure of angle 2 is congruent to the measure of angle 8, and they are called alternate exterior angles. And we're going to call that AE for short. Okay? And you have the same thing for, we have 2 and 8, the same thing for 1 and 7. And I'm going to erase what I wrote in the beginning so I can have some space. All right, so the measure of angle 1 is congruent to the measure of angle 7, and we're going to say by alternate exterior angles, AE. All right. Now, I think I went through and we have all the angles taken care of, except on this side. Let me go ahead and knock these out. 2 and 6 are congruent to each other because 2 is at the top of the line and 6 is at the top of the line. So the measure of angle 2 is congruent to the measure of angle 6, and that's by corresponding angles. And that means matching angles, corresponding. One sit at the top of the line, the other sit at the top of the line. Okay, we have that same situation going on with the measure of angle 4 is congruent to the measure of angle 7, because if you look at the measure of angle 4, it's at the bottom of the top line, and guess what? The measure of angle 7 is at the bottom of the bottom line. So that's going to be corresponding angles again. All right. And of course, you already know 2 and 4 are linear pairs. They're supplementary. 6 and 8 is called a linear pair. 6 and 7 is a linear pair. 5 and 8 is a linear pair. And 3 and 1 is a linear pair. So it's the same as 1 and 2, 4 and 3, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8. Linear pairs is when two angles add together to give you 180 degrees. Also, if you look on this side, the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 6 is equal to 180 degrees. That's the same side of the transversal. Same thing with 2 and 7. The measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 7 is also equal to 180. Once again, same side of the transversal. Same side of the transversal. That means these angles are supplementary. All right, I think I covered them all. Let me get the ones that you already know from middle school. I'm going to erase this. The angles that you already know from middle school are the vertical angles. So the measure of angle, this was 2. The measure of angle 1 is congruent to the measure of angle 4 by vertical angles. This one we learned yesterday in class, and that you know from middle school. And I'm going to leave you guys to do the rest of them. I'll do 2 for you. 2 is congruent to the measure of angle 3, and that 2 is by rule of vertical angles. And of course, you can find the other vertical angles yourself. Okay, please, please, please go back and review this video if you have to, because we're going to talk about this more in depth in class tomorrow. So I showed you all the angles and we've made the conclusions. All right, see you tomorrow. Bye.